this conference by introducing myself. So my name is Kay. I'm 20. I'm pursuing a master's degree in architecture, and I'm a builder for Team Visionary, Hydra, and Antares. And today we'll discuss about how to build utopias in Minecraft and what you should be considering to build one. So we'll go over multiple themes, from the planning to what's about the imaginary spirit around the utopia, what's around them, and mostly the decisions you're going to take for the pursuing of the project till its completion. Donc là, tu peux passer à la diapo suivante. So first thing, what's a utopia? Utopias are a personal construct. They rely on personal perspective, experiences, education, and more simply, it is the projection of a paradise and some idealistic place, a regime, a city, set somewhere in time, which, according to you, would lie and tend to perfection. Let me just warp there. So for the Greeks, the utopia was an imaginary harmony between environment, which would be translated by nature, people, and states, which can be translated by cities and governments. The harmony creates the utopia, just as well as the utopia tends to perfection, and it's basically an attempt to reach perfection. So, the main question is, when you're building a utopia, is what are you ready to sacrifice for the utopia to function and to actually work? Are you ready to lose your identity, the value of property, the power, the taste, maybe even life? These need to be considered when starting a utopian project. So, tu peux passer à la diapo suivante. Normalement, c'est avec plein de petits points. So, there are a few inputs that will define the context of a utopia, which would be the size, the scale, the political regime, which will influence the city planning, the era, which would be the place in time and would define maybe the materials and the palette of materials, maybe the architectural style, the site, which will be the biome, the place, the planet, and eventually the weather conditions. And finally, the historical background, which is a huge input for a utopia. And all of that will create the context in which the utopia will stand, and this will give us the base with which we can start. So, all of that will define and point towards a specific architectural style and eventually the kind of utopia it will be. So for the next slide, as you can see, we have a color palette. Donc là, tu peux montrer la slide suivante avec les couleurs là. For the first one, for instance, we have yellow, brown, and gray, a light gray, and this shows some kind of friendly feeling. So if you go over the Minecraft server now and use /warp utopias, plural utopias, you will be able to spawn in the area. So I will just put that in the masterclass channel. My bad. There you go. So if you warp there and you follow the yellow line, you will be able to see some pretty impressive example of that palette, which will show a city we built with the Antares architects for my bad for a community of farmers. Alors là, en gros, si tu peux montrer avec ta caméra Windmill Valley, s'il y a moyen. Si tu veux, tu peux mettre du speed. Hein. Il suffit juste dessus la ligne jaune. So, the palette will definitely influence the feeling you have staring at the city and what it will bring. Speaking about, the feeling you want to give when you first see it and how it works. So the second color palette, the green, blue, and white, will be more like feeling futuristic, peaceful, give hope, technologies, like very green and sustainable places, just as well as the arc is, if you've seen the project. Then we have the gray, the red, and the dark gray, which will be more featuring values like power and superiority, which bring a brand new aspect of a pretty supremacist utopia, which could actually feed some mentalities. And finally, the last palette, which is really connoted by future things, white, orange, and black, which often refers to spaceships and military advanced technology, and most likely the space kind world. So when you get all of that together, you have really specific colors matching materials in Minecraft, and thus you can give some ambient feeling to your city, and well, not only to your city but to your build in general. So now that we're done with the palette, I can introduce you more to the works of the Antares Architects, which is a team of writers, novelists, drawers, painters, artists. We even have engineers, architects, and of course Minecraft builders. And our goal is to design utopias with historical backgrounds, with real stories behind them. So let's get started with the first one, shall we? You should already be there, just following the yellow line, then the green line, sorry. You should see the Windmill Valley. And this city was made to have a community feeling. So if we take in consideration the previous inputs I mentioned, which are the size, the scale, the regime, the era, the site, and the background. For the size, Windmill Valley, this city at the green spot, is a community or a village. The scale is 1:1, at the scale of a human. The regime would be economical truce mixed with some Marxism thing. The era is feudal, so it's Middle Age. So not a lot of education and not a lot of technologies. And the site would be a windy, fertile valley in which you would be able to grow a lot of plants and as well make some windmills function pretty well. And the background, this city would be actually built for maintain a truce between three empires, and this would be basically their attic where they can have all the food and basically never starve. So when you walk in the city, you have a feeling of communitarism. Like every single building is pretty much equal. You have all the wooden roofs, which are houses. Then you have some roofs that are composed of wood and hay bales, which represent in this city the agricultural and economical point of view, the status in the society. And then finally you have the top of the hierarchy, which is the stone roof, which is only used for the city hall, for instance, that is right in the middle of the city at the key spot, the very strategic spot that can see every single entrance in the city and thus keep some control over it. So this is kind of utopia here. We have a center, we have the government, And then all around it, we have a sort of hierarchy, very well organized, of workers and economical transactions. As well as you can see, the landscape around the city is pretty original. It's a landscape sculpted by the wind and thus pretty, curved and eroded. So this is also a generator of a utopia. If you don't have an imaginary landscape around it, it might not look as well as crazy cool as just some plain boring thing. So now we have to walk over to the other side of the map, which is the red line. So you can just warp back to the main warp/warp utopias, and the red line should be right in front of you. So when you're in front of that castle, the red line, you notice immediately there is some kind of power coming out of it. This castle both looks a bit like a fairy castle and pretty impressive bunker ship. And if you move around to the pink beacon that you can see at the back, you have a section of the castle to show how it's composed on the inside. So for this one, the utopia doesn't only rely on the historical background, but most importantly on the architecture style, which is for that mostly inspired by fantasy novels and, for instance, some Beaux-Arts architecture elements. So, for instance, you've got this play with the stairs, which are really beloved by the Beaux-Arts architects in France of the late, I think it's the 19th and 18th century. You can see there is a play with the ground where all the peasants would be down the castle, then there are the stairs for the richer ones, and then you access in this huge throne room where the king is sitting at the very bottom, well, the very edge, sorry, my bad, and can just see you can see if you see here, this is the throne actually, it's cut in half, but you can see the gate, the very entrance, and thus you have a sort of superiority among the people entering the castle. And this somehow could be considered a utopia for people with a very dominant personality that would like to actually put their power over everyone. Actually, this would also match some people that would like to be protected or feel protected by some, I don't really know the name in English, I'm just going to say king. Like the king can bring food, it can bring protection, so security, and being in a very secure place could fit many personalities actually. So there is nothing bad about it or about wishing or expecting to be safe in some place. So this is a monarchy type building. So you've got a monarch sitting at one edge, which is pretty much defended by the whole building itself. And then when you walk and you go towards that monarch, you cross multiple spaces and different feelings. First you enter some compressed space, then you end up in being a large one, then the large gets even larger, all of that. So it's a play on volumes and spaces, which makes this utopian architecture. Actually, if you really want to be critic of that, you can notice, for instance, the structure of the building isn't really relevant here, as far as, for instance, the ceiling is pretty thin, and if this building wanted actually to exist, the ceiling would need to be a bit, thicker, otherwise it would just crumble. So, apart from that, which is actually good, we're gonna head to more modern and contemporary utopias. So you can warp back to the hub/warp utopias, not the hub, sorry, and then follow the blue line. And the blue line will actually lead you to a small villa that is a beach house and is one of the concepts I use for the most contemporary architectures, which would be more synchronized with symbiosis themes. So I'm just going to take a quick drink, because this actually is one of the main themes. So, as you can see with this house, when you stand on the beach, it doesn't stand out that much. The geometry is a bit extravagant, but the materials really match the context. So you can see the grass around, it pretty much matches the background. You can see the sand and the sandstone match pretty well together, and even the stone looks like it's just a regular cliff. So, taking that as a input, this house really melts and merges itself into the context. And this pretty much is the new kind of architectures people are expecting, because the future architecture is meant to be, in some point, invisible. It could be invisible on the ecological point of view, on the visual point of view, pretty much anything. It's just that architecture doesn't have to stand on the way of things, but pretty much help them develop, if you see what I mean. This is some more theoretical things. So, this house here pretty much gets into a symbiosis with its context. So now we're going to head to this, to the end of the blue line. If you can see this huge sign arc here, so you can just follow straight forward, go through the gates, and enter this massive build. We're building with the Antares architects, and here you will discover some actual utopia that looks like one, because this is our main work currently. So I will just give you 5 minutes. Thank you. My pleasure. So you might take 5 minutes to just, roam around, and I will just explain how it works then, because I've got some pictures to send you in the event broadcast. So I'm just going to drop some pictures, some renderings of the whole city, because I'm not sure with the render distance in the game that you would be able to see it completely. So let's go for that. So, if you check the event broadcast channel, you can see an overview of the entire platform, and I should be able to explain how it works now. So can you just give me some confirmation, please? Oh, actually, there are lots of people here. That's my pleasure. All right. So let's say you all have seen these renderings. So this platform is my biggest work of all, and right now my schedule is just perfect because I had to get half an hour on the introduction before this part, and at 2:30 I should be starting this, so it's perfect. All right, so Arc. This city is called Arc, and it should actually be noticed that the name fits the purpose of the city, because the name from Ark comes from an ark itself, like Noah's Ark that saved the animals from the gods, mayhem with tsunamis and shit, and pretty much it's a refuge, it's a shelter. And this city, even though it looks like some luxurious resort with roller coasters floating over it, no, it's not that. Actually, it's made to be the perfect shelter, able to host humanity and save it from the ocean's level rising because of global warming, etc. So actually, it's a city made to counter a pretty depressing scenario in which humanity has failed to actually get something good out of the land of Earth. It needs to go over the oceans because there is nothing else. So this city organizes on a very simple principle. We have a barrier circling the whole city, which is the big circle you can see on the first image. Then we have the central pelga. If you look at the things on the render, it should be the four towers, the four similar towers in the middle with some, how do you call that already? Wind turbines on them, yeah. And this is the actual geometrical center of the city, and also the center of all the movements that are going to occur here. So first thing you can notice here are that there are not a single cars. All the movements and everything have to be done on foot or train, and thus there is no pollution. Everything is just electrical, and all the electricity comes from actual green sources, like solar panels. You can see these gigantic solar panels that grab 8 panels themselves. And then if you move over, I think it's to the north of the city, you can see 8, I think there are 8, yes, wind turbines that just gather the wind energy. Also, I need to mention something about the barrier, so the big circle that protects the city. It's designed to actually gather the energy of the waves and action some turbines. So whatever the stream comes from, the arc actually gets some energy. Even if there's no wind, there might be a stream in the ocean and then give energy as well as sun energy. So there always are power sources on this thing. So when it comes to symbiosis, because that's actually the goal of the project, the symbiosis, the goal was to make the 3 main parts of what's existing on Earth collide in only one good project. Sorry, I punched the microphone. So the 3 main inputs of this project are architecture, ocean, and people. So the people already live in architecture on the ground, but then barely no people live in architecture on the ocean. So we had to collide already architecture and ocean for it to work. But then mainly on oceans, the actual architecture that exists are boats. And boats cannot, fulfill all the needs humans have. For instance, food. You cannot get your own food on a boat. You cannot grow your own things. Oh, hi, merging, by the way. And the goal of ARC was to make a symbiosis between these 3 inputs by putting them together like an archipel. Because as you can see in the Pacific Ocean and in the Caribbean Sea, we have tiny islands that are actually able to work even though they have not much, resources. They don't have much land occupation. They don't have much, basically resources like petrol or shit. So they need to get other energy sources such as wind, sun, and the stream energy. So that's what I firstly took in consideration when making ARC. I said, all right, we need to have these 3 energy sources working well together. So it has to be in the middle of the ocean, because in the middle of the ocean you have good wind pressure, like there is no obstacles, so the wind is all right, it just flows right through your city. And then you have the streams that the arc is supposed to follow, it's just supposed to float. So randomly following the streams, so gather their energy. And the sun is just, day and night. And yeah, basically it's the same as land. But the thing is, with an archipel, you don't have the problem of a gigantic platform, which would be just making a huge shadow under it, and thus it wouldn't give any good things with the ocean. It would be just like a massive plate floating on the ocean, and in the middle you're pretty safe. But what if the plate starts, just sinking? You're in the middle, whatever, you will be completely flooded. So the advantage of the archipel is first to be more fluid, just like a fishing net. When there is a fishing net on the ocean, it will follow the shape of the waves, but it will never, reverse like upside down. And thus, that's why we can have skyscrapers on that, because the city is so big that even if one skyscraper starts to bend, all the islands around it will, push on the other side, and so keep it stable, basically. And on the other hand, when there are waves and the city curves under them, basically it doesn't break, or you don't have massive structural damage done because it's not, balanced. So that's the first thing about the archipel. Also, I mentioned the light and the shadow. The light and the shadow were actually about what's under the city, which would be the sea life. So everything that's, I don't know how to call vegetables in the sea, like alga or something, and fishes, which would be fed by the city itself. So when the humans use stuff like eat and just basically consume, they could throw away their wastes in the ocean, and the fishes would basically eat them. So it would be a symbiosis for that. And then the fishes would also fed, all wastes. So like, I don't know, because actually a city like this would not function on things that are not bio-destroyable. So like it would just be recyclable material or actual food for fishes. And yeah, pretty much. And then the fishes would feed the humans in return. So like the humans feed the sea feed the humans. And I'm not even talking about the birds. So that would be insane. Also, for everything that's the crops and how to keep some seeds safe from the actual rough oceanic climate, we have biodomes. So, I don't know if you've seen this island yet. It looks like a huge spider with a sort of dome in the middle and many trees on it. So if you find it, if it's next to you, you can get in and actually see how it works. So we've got, Feria inside of it. You can actually see some of these crops. So they grow in protected areas. These are microclimates, and they help to protect the crops that are too weak to survive outside in the ocean climate. So this could help transferring species from one place on Earth to the next one without them being destroyed and without them being, factorized or synthesized by science. So this would be just clean and ecological and safe. We might have some genetical problems with that at some point, but I'm not really an expert for that. I've got to admit, I've got my own limits. Then, on the architectural point of view, because that's why we're here, right? The houses, the skyscrapers, and the other buildings have some hierarchy. You can see that the more curves you have, the more you are important in the society. So, for instance, the houses are all very squarey because they're like the bottom, the base, on which everything else is built. You have the trains, which link them together, which are pretty curvy because they have to be. And then you have all the medium buildings, which are the biodome, the aquarium, for instance. You've got the financial pelgo, you've got the media center, and eventually the train station. All of these are pretty curvy, pretty, well, I can say they are bigger, and instinctively they bring the feeling of power. And like, not power pushing on the other people around them, but just pretty much like spots that matter more than others. So you can see also the energy islands are pretty distinctive. And also, finally, I think this is, if the chunks would be please loading, I think the final one, which represents actually the main part of the work, would be the largest pelgo, which hosts, this huge tower with white triangle, blue triangles on it, which we call the central plaza, which is actually meant to be the center of the life in the arc. So you've got this massive train station. I'm just gonna reload all my chunks because this is getting so messy. So yeah, pretty much this is where ADX is, and this is pretty much the center of the life on arc. You've got all the main buildings on this. You've got a train station. You have a biodome, which is not built yet. You've got basically restaurants, showcases, places. You've got some underground boating cargo facility. So pretty much if everything goes down, this island still remains standing. And as you can see, there is a huge tower on this, which is called the Founder's Tower, and which represents the actual presence of an order on this platform, which is led by the founding fathers. So it sounds a bit dystopian like this, but if everyone respects, follows the basic rules of, being together on the platform, everything goes well. It's like there are no rules, but just being nice and doing your job, man. All right. So as you can see, this is one of the most advanced examples I've got here of a symbiosis between both nature, technology, and humanity, actually. And this is what you should be aiming for when you build a utopia. You should have a decision at the beginning that leads the whole project, because if you don't have one really accurate intention, you will not be able to fulfill the needs and answer to all the questions that are raised, because this is actually what a utopia is. It's answering some questions. So we now are going to head to the main warp. So warp utopias again. Sorry, guys. And I'm going to show you how we could eventually plan a city really quickly. For instance, a base of city. So you can warp Utopia, go on the right, and blue line on the right, straight next to the mountain, and you can see a huge plot I made ready for that. So I'm just going to toggle my full screen and tell you more about this one. So the scenario behind this city has been written by Emerging Hail, which is here on the server with us. So Emerging, if you mind copy pasting that down in the chat, that would be nice. I'm just going to drink a bit and then get started on the building. So if you've got questions now, after you send, that's what it was for. After you send that, I will be doing Q&A while I am building. So I've got like 15 minutes left. That's perfect. That's exactly the time I need. Also, if my pronunciation isn't perfect, I apologize. I think my voice is dying, like, seriously. Alright. So, according to this scenario, our city is a utopia. Yeah, you told me that, actually, okay. So, this city is meant to be a dystopia, but actually good. So it's a utopia, but you know, a bit shady. So let's get started on that. So the air is polluted outside, and so the people united and built a sort of dome inside. But how is it gonna get organized? And that's the question I asked him. So he wrote, you know, sort of summary of that. So if he minds putting that in, that'd be nice. Thank you. So we'll just start on this. So for instance, because there are domes, we need cylinders and spheres. So because it's some toxic environment, we need to contrast with the outside, which is toxic. Well, actually, if you can just send it in this chat, it should be all right. Or you can just drop it in the event broadcast if you have the permissions. If you don't, I can, you know, just copy paste it. It should work. So, cylinder. I remember the commands. My bad. I'm bad at this. So let's say we've got a 35 wide. Actually, I think I wanted a sphere. So let's get on the planning first, and then we'll build. So as you can see in the middle, we can have some hub, which will be the center of the city. Connected to the hub, we might need some political center. So we might some big dome not too far away, which would be able to host some parliament, or maybe the main government and institution headquarters. So of course that needs to be defined in the story. So we can have a small one, which would be just super close, even a bit melting in the middle. As you can see, we can have some transitional space here. And then we might need some axes, just like we had in the gray and red castle. As you could see, there were two clear symmetry axes. There was the entrance one and the second one. Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, it's in my DMs. Okay, so let me just take 1 minute. So I think I can just... Woo. There we go. Alright, so please do not mind the language of that, because it's pretty much a joke. But this gives the theme of that. Alright. So dirty array, the bomb. It's okay, man. So dirty array, the bomb just fell on the earth, so everything is hella toxic, so you need to be in domes. So if this dome is the center, if this dome is going to be the parliament or the actual security council, we need to have different accesses to the hub, but that not directly lead to this one. So this one is only connected to the hub and nothing else. So then on this side we might have actual corridors leading to somewhere like other residential domes. So let's just make a simple line here. And then in the middle of that, we might have another dome of maybe, it has to be smaller. So let's say this is residential. So you have residences here, the hub in the center for the political life, and the parliament. Actually, no. Residences here wouldn't match, so maybe we can have some economical place here, and then small domes all around it that would form the residential areas. So it organizes like this. So you have a true hierarchy because it goes also through the shape of what you're building. So for instance, here we have 6 residential places for 1 economical hub, and we'll probably have 4 economical hubs for 4 economical hubs for the main hub in the center. So, you know, we have a sort of balance there. and this might lead to some actual organization for the city. So let's go for 20, and then I'll go back to 10. Then I'm sorry if the keyboard makes a bit of noise. I tried to get my streamer thing out, but I don't have a Twitch channel, so fuck it. Oh yeah, this circle was way too close. Alright, so see, you've got a bit of a messy organization there, but you've got some hierarchy, and this is actually what we need in a city where everything outside is fucked. We need something very clear and, you know, stable on the inside. So we have to control to not have riots and eventually, you know, fuck-ups inside of the city. So it has to be clear and comfortable and good for people to live in, so they don't want to go outside and eventually die or riot and, you know, just open the gate saying, it's not toxic out there, fuck. So you need to keep some control of them, but be always positive. Yeah, so once you have this, you can see how the planning is going. So it's really centralistic. It looks a bit like what the French cities actually look like compared to Paris. So you've got the main Paris hub and then all the smaller cities all around it. So it's pretty much the same idea right there. So now, let's say we got this, because I don't think we've got much time left. Sorry. Yeah, we've got 8 minutes. 8 minutes and we're done. So once we have this organization, let's just not mention this last corner there. We might need some, you know, higher floor, higher ground compared to what's next to us. So we might actually just stack everything that's there for like 10 meters, so it really stands out from the other places all around. So we've got to imagine having craters and buildings all around it. So let's say 15. Oh, I've got to confirm. Shit. There we go. So all these domes now look like something. So of course, I think if I actually had to build a city like this, the residential parts would be a bit lower, and then you would go higher, always climbing as far as you go up in the social ladder. You see what I mean? So the residential areas would be on the floor pretty much. Then the economical hubs would be a bit higher. Then the main hub would be even higher, and then the parliament and the government place would be really higher, like to contrast with what's around it. So I think I forgot to mention this when I talked about the materials, but when you are creating some utopia, you absolutely need to have some very clear decisions about the materials. So if your decision is to melt in the landscape, you have to choose very soft materials that fit. So it's like green clays, sandstone, endstone, you know, all these pretty smooth materials. And then if you want to have a huge contrast, because this is what you want, right? Sometimes you just need to have something very powerful to show how cool this utopia is. For instance, with Arc, you've got a sort of trio of colors, but which really contrast with one another. If you want that, just go ahead and use it, because nobody will say, this is weird, because you actually need that sometimes. So let's go just for some, I see you coming, emerging. If you want to build some domes, let's just get some domes, right? So I think it's H sphere. So we might use maybe blue or orange. Yeah, maybe orange. Orange might be nice. 19. There we go. So the first dome. Oh yeah, nice. Very nice, Kay. Good, well did it. Alright, so we might have the first dome here. So for instance, having a very big There we go. A very big difference between... I might actually need a compass for that. Of course. I need to reduce the speed or I can get... Okay, so we have this big orange dome here. Of course, we have a very... Yeah, it's pretty much that, actually, if you want to live in a dome, but that's a question of choice, my friend. So then, I forgot the side of this one. I think it was like 35 something, so I'm going to set 34. Yeah, I wasn't in the right place again. Right. I think I'll never find it. Is that good? Yes. Actually, this is approximately good. Let's just forget about that wall, because it comes on the exact same place. Alright, so now that you've got these domes, you want to put something in there. So let's just begin by the smaller one we made. And you're just going to stand with welded simply and fill it with the material you like. So if it has to be some clean city, far from the toxic, sides outside, you've got to fill it with a clean material so people feel safe. I'm not saying especially grass, for instance, but maybe some clean iron or quartz. So like, I'm just going to put this one, for instance. So it looks clean and proper. So when you're inside of that, you might have people's quarters that have windows looking outside, and eventually gardens if the sun actually manages to filter through the domes. But you would also have, and I think this is the main aspect of the build, you absolutely need to have what they call, I think it's called a sas or something in French. You need to have a small area to clean yourself before entering the city, or people will just kill you so bad. So on the ground, when you get into the city, you need small spaces to enter, clean yourself, get out of the toxic bubble you were in, and then actually enter the city without contaminating everyone that's in. So if you look at this build from afar, and boom, and you need someplace, a shelter again, to feel okay. But in most cases, a utopia wouldn't happen in such, desperate conditions. You can find some cool communities, and yeah, that would be dope. So yeah, actually, you might use green glass as fog, like toxic fog. Eventually, have broken chimneys of industries all around, even craters like a bomb fell, and ruins, pretty much like Fallout. This kind of cities. This might work, actually. Yeah, good point. So I'm gonna head to the conclusion. So these were my methods, the method we use in Enterprise Architects to actually build our utopias and how we think the whole project. Because this is not only a construction, a build, or a building. It's first of all, it's a story, and then you ask questions on it. Because if you don't have the base story, you don't have the need to build something that tends to perfection. See what I mean? Because architecture, in the first point, needs to fill a need, and if it doesn't fit, it just doesn't have any sense. It's called art, actually, if it doesn't need anything. If it's just to represent something, it's called art. And yeah, exactly. The story should be made along with the build, or made before you actually get started with the blocks. And this will lead to an actual good project, like Arc, because I didn't start Arc before I was sure of what I wanted to make. because I had like millions of sketches before placing the first block. So of course you might need some practice with that. Then for the conclusion, I wanted to say how people created their own utopias, because like I said in the beginning, most people have their own opinion of the utopia, because this is my representation, of course, but many people have a very different one. So as far as utopias are personal, some teams get in the real world to get some people in the real world to design their utopias to shape the future. So I wanted to mention the great work of Blockworks, which are working with communities to redesign their cities. And this is some amazing, works. And I've got also an article I absolutely wanted to link. So I'm just going to grab this out of Minecraft and drop it in the event broadcast channel. If you want to check it out, it's how very, how do I say that? It is how very poor young people use Minecraft in their poor cities to redesign their environment and the future of their places. So this is a really interesting article if you want to check it out. I will just copy it right now. So, event broadcast. There you go. You might check this out. This is really impressive. So, thank you for listening. I hope you learned some things. If you have any questions, you can now ask them, because I've got a bit of, I think I've got like 10 minutes to answer your questions. So, please feel free, and thank you for listening. You're welcome, AD. It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. So if you have, if you're more interested into the entire Architect's works, you might actually check our Discord channel, so I can post it like later today. I will drop the Discord channel, and we will soon have it, cleaned up and ready to get some visitors, so you could see our portfolios, how our works are going. You could eventually connect on the server, so we'll get everything sorted, so everything works, pretty clean, and everyone could just visit us. So right now, I've got to admit, it's a complete mess, but in just a few weeks, I think this should all be cleaned and ready to actually show people how deep we are into conception. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on later.